Hello, Allie Costa. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you, Deb?
Great. Thank you so much for taking some time out to chat with me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you in return for inviting me. I'm excited.
Yay. So let's just slate you really fast, your name and the name of the play.
Sure. My name is Allie Costa, and my monologue that's part of this anthology is called Power Pose.
Yes. And the first question is, what called you to become a playwright, if anything? Did something
Oh,
call?
I have always been a storyteller my entire life. Like as far as I can remember, I have been acting and writing, making up stories and putting them on for my family or my pets and using my stuffed animals to act things out. Honestly, I've known my entire life who I am and what I wanted to do, and I've always felt really lucky that I know what my passions are and that I have such a huge drive to pursue them. So yeah, this has always been me. I am an actor as well as a writer, a director, and a singer. And I work in film, in television, in theater, and in voiceover. So I enjoy a multitude of mediums, all different genres. And as long as there's a good story to tell and a great character arc, I'm there.
Yes. Love it, love it, love it. So you didn't begin in a different medium. Actually, it's always been sort of theatrical for you, I'm assuming.
Yeah, it's always been all of it. I've always, again, no joke, ever since I was tiny, when I had an idea for a story, I always knew immediately what medium it would be in. I always knew if it was supposed to be a film, if it was supposed to be on stage. I really love episodic storytelling, both in books and in television. So I've always had a knack for that as well. And I like I said, writing and performing in all of those things because I think it's all valuable, and how we tell stories and how we invite our audience to engage or participate. It's different in live theater. It's different watching a TV show from week to week. And it's different being in, a quiet film for an hour and a half with a whole bunch of people and having a similar experience. But the story has a beginning, a middle, and an end in that time frame.
Mhm.
So yeah, I've always loved all of those. And whenever people ask, which one is your favorite, or if you could only do one, I'll just start crying if you try to make me only do one. My goodness. Same thing when somebody's like, well, are you really a writer? Are you really an actor? I'm like, okay, so go tell that to Gene Kelly, or go tell that to anybody who has, as Avita says, their fingers in dozens of different pies. All of mine are also interconnected. So I can see from, if I'm on stage, I understand what it's like to be in the audience. If I'm behind the camera, I know what it's like to be in front of it. And I think that informs and really helps me have a very well-rounded, not only experience, but engaging with, if I am directing my actors. I know what it's like to be
Right.
on that side of things, as opposed to maybe someone who doesn't, somebody who's very technical versus just artistic. I like to know that I'm both of those things.
Yes, and I feel it resonates so much with the work that we've done at Venus, because there's one show that we did called 731, and for some reason on that show there was just no tech, there was no stage manager, there was no front of house. It's just four actors, and I guess it was more like a troupe. But at Venus we're very Renaissance, so we
Mhm.
wrote, like, I'll design the costumes and I'll direct the show, or I'll
Right.
write, same thing. And you feel more alive that way. Like, it's like almost like gardening, like you're replacing crops, like you're enriching the soil. You're not just planting the same thing over and over.
Yeah.
And in this show, it was, I was in it, but I was only in the last scene of the first act, and then I was in the entire second act. And then the only guy in the show was not in that one scene I was in. So I would jump out of the booth and then jump back in, do my lines, jump back in, and then intermission, he'd jump back into carrying
Right.
run a house during intermission, then jump in the booth and run it for us. And what we loved that, because we were all so engaged all the time.
Right. And if you have people that you're doing it not only as a needs must, but because you love it and you're like, let's keep, it's like, this is a silly an analogy, especially since I've never actually been on a boat, but it's like making sure somebody's always at the wheel, but whoever's at the wheel is always someone that you trust. So
And
you're
it's all,
passing it off with love. Like you just said, I'm going to be on stage. I know that so-and-so can take
yeah,
care of ship while I'm doing that, because I've been in shows, and I'm sure you have as well, that were not that experience, that were, you know, you show up for tech week and you go, who's doing tech? I mean, I've done stuff. I could sit here and tell you stories.
Yeah, me too.
Every iteration of stuff. And but the good news is, you know, to accentuate the positive, it's the ones that are the people that came together, the people that made it work. Like I did a play, I wrote a full-length play, and my stage manager the week before the play was dismissed, and so I had to get somebody very quickly. And it all came together, and it was amazing, and they were so hands-on, and they were so dedicated to it, and wanted to make sure, here, do I have all the cues, do I have all the things, and we had a better show than we would have otherwise. Hello.
Yes, your cat. I see your cat.
Hi.
And I think when you compare it to a boat, it's like a crew, right? You have if you run a tight ship, it means you've got all hands on deck and an amazing crew kind of working together and rotating roles. To me, in that project, actually, I felt so connected to it. I think we all did. It was like, we don't want anyone to get in the way. Like you're saying, like that one person, it got tighter and better.
Yeah.
Like I had an actor drop on me over halfway through a run. I mean, this has happened a lot, but in this one particular time, it was a series of suffrage plays, and I thought, I just replaced her with a silk fern, you know? And so I restaged it so that the stage manager walked on and read behind the fern, and like we just put a hat on the fern, and it was the funniest part of the whole show. And I think what it is that energy, like when you get the right people connecting, and when the wrong people are in there, it's devastating.
It is, because if you're all wanting to tell a story, and somebody, and it doesn't have to be ill intent. It literally can be, it's just not a good fit. The vibes are just off. The energy is off, or they just they booked another gig and they were only at some of the rehearsals, all of that kind of stuff. And it is different. I think there are folks that I know that prefer to play only in one lane, and by that I mean only do theater, only do film, only do TV. And I like having conversations with different people, because they don't, if they haven't had that experience of, what do you mean you can't just stop and start over if you're doing theater, and somebody's never done that before? Or somebody goes, what do you mean you get to do it more than once? What do you mean you get to do more than one take? Live theater, you just have to keep going, unless, of course, there are always instances where it is safer to stop, or you need to stop for some reason. But I mean, I had a show once where one actor did not show up, and unfortunately we had a director who did not care very much, is how I'll put it. That's and awful. So we actors backstage had to scramble and go, hey Deb, can you cover this scene? Okay, what lines does he have? Who can say them? What makes sense? Blah blah blah. Because when somebody doesn't show up right before a show, and you don't have swings or any sort of understudy, and also if the show is about to go on in 10 minutes, even if you had an understudy, if they're in Santa Monica and you're in downtown LA, they're not going to get there in time. So you have to make these decisions, and you have to, sometimes the stage manager goes on, or sometimes people cover lines, or whatever the case may be. And at the heart of it is, how can we safely do this as humans, as people moving around, make sure nobody's bumping into each other or whatnot, and how can we best serve the story and still tell the story without. That's a very amusing about the fern. I hope that the writer was on board with that.
A collection of suffrage plays, so all the writers were dead. But yeah, it was hilarious. It was the best part of the show. And and there was a solo show I did, and about 15 minutes before go time, like this lightning bolt struck the street and it blew out our transformer. So we had no electricity, and I don't know, like I've been at this for 35 years, and this was a solo show tribute to my friend who I'd lost, and I was meeting people, and I was like, can you come back? Can you come back when we have electricity? And a lot of audience was like, sure. But there were about 8 people who were like, no, this is my only night to see it. And it's like, having done like 8 different solo shows, I was just like, I'm not going to turn away audience. Like, and so Amy and I, like my creative partner in crime, are like, you know, how do we make it work? And everyone's got a cell phone now. And we like gave them the YouTube link to the slideshow that we would have shown.
Oh, and cool.
turn on their flashlights on their phone, and they could light me however they wanted. And then I had flashlights planted around and it was a totally different show. Like, it was totally, but it was amazing. And I just remember after curtain call, I couldn't leave because it was pitch black, you know? So I sat on the stage and they all stayed seated. And then we just sat there for about 45 minutes talking about what had just happened, you know?
Oh, wow. That's
It's
so
just,
lovely. First of all, what a lovely thing to do, and what a lovely tribute to your friend. How amazing that people stayed in the audience. And somewhere out there, somebody has devised a show specifically like that. There are always people who are like, you will enter in pitch black. There will
right.
be one balloon. You will turn on your cell phone at exactly 12:06. Like, so it's really cool to go, when is it created this way because of a needs-based situation. And that could inform the next thing. Like, maybe the dramaturgy then becomes, hey, you know what? It actually was really cool when there was only light on the left side of the stage. And that means, you know, blah, blah, blah. And somewhere Gatsby with his green light is going, woohoo, you know, that it makes sense somehow. And then also that an audience can be very forgiving, because I think at the end of the day, that's why black box theaters continue to thrive. It's not only because small theaters perhaps don't have a budget to do X, Y, and Z, but because if you're coming to see the story, if you're coming to see the artist, you're coming to see the singer, you're coming to see whatever that is, that at the end of the day is what you're going to experience. Sorry that we didn't have fancy costumes. Sorry that we didn't have a fancy, you know, board, but here's the story. Let us tell it to you.
Yeah. And it's so cool. Yes. It's about the impulse and the life of the work, you know?
Yeah.
So let's talk about your monologue. Tell us all about your monologue.
Oh, sure. Power Pose is a high energy, zany, fun piece about a woman who gets a phone call and gets an unexpected job interview that she has to run off to immediately. And it was inspired by a specific event, not in real life, but a playwriting event. So Samuel French Bookshop here in Los Angeles, which sadly has since closed, used to have events fairly often that were either play readings or monologue events where there was a certain topic or a theme. And sometimes it was something like, it's Halloween, so let's do spooky stuff. And other times it would be, you know, a very specific thing. And in this case, she was doing an event called Woman, that she just wanted to celebrate female writers and female characters. So I wrote 2 pieces for that event, and this was one of them.
Very nice. Very nice.
Yes.
Let's talk about your writing process as a playwright.
Sure.
Yeah. I always ask, like, do you need to light a candle? Is there any kind of ritual? Like, what? And I have other people who are like, no, and everyone's so different. So I was just wondering, what is your process like?
That is a great question, and I wish, as I know that a lot of writers do, I wish that the same process helped every time, because it all depends on what you're doing it for. If you're doing it for yourself or a specific opportunity, if there's a deadline, right? All of these things factor in, as well as if there is a specific prompt. If you're doing something that's I've done 24-hour plays, I've done 48-hour films where it has to take place in a barnyard and one character has to say, oh, forsooth, Matilda, and then you have these things. It also depends on if you look at those things as opportunities to be creative or if you consider them to be constraining. But for me, in a general sense, if an idea comes to me untethered, unrelated to, I have to write because I have this thing that's due on Monday, whatnot, if it comes to me and I just start writing, that's the most amazing thing. I love when inspiration strikes. I also love when inspiration strikes fully. And by that, I mean when I know how it's going to end. If there's a twist that I already know it, if I know what the full premise is, that's always more helpful. As a writer, I mean, I've written literally hundreds of scripts and plays. I'm a filmmaker. I've done episodic work. I've done stage work. I've done stuff for younger audiences, all kinds of things, and all different running times. But every time it happens, it's not writer's block so much, but I have an idea, I want to execute it, sure, I'm writing. But if I have the ending in mind, if I have the roadmap in mind, rather that's just me knowing it or actually having written an outline that says A, B, C, D, I am more confident while writing it, and it it comes more quickly, obviously, when the inspiration fairy strikes, and that's amazing. I want them to visit all the time. I wish that they did. But I know that for me personally, if I know where I'm going, it's like having a roadmap. If I know where I'm going, I know where I'm ending up, then it's going to be easier to write to, and I'm probably going to be more satisfied. Things can still change along the way, but I personally like it better if I know where I'm starting, what's going to happen, where the end point is. And as far as the process itself, I don't have like you said, like lighting candle or anything like that. It's me at my computer, or if I'm out and about writing. I do really like writing longhand, but I have found that since everything is digital, it's going to be easier to just sit down and start typing. And I know that some stuff happens if you just start writing and see what happens. The writers that are called pantsers, that, just fly by the seat of their pants and see what happens. And sometimes that works. It also can be more or less difficult depending on the length.
Right.
Because obviously if you're doing a 1-minute play, which I've had the great honor to participate in those as well, it can be a setup and an execution, and here you are. Let's just keep it, fun and make sure you're running to the right time. If you're doing a full-length play, you can have the loftiest ambitions, but it can feel harder if there's a lot more that you have to go through. And I know people that have rules like writing for an hour a day. I know people that say 5 pages a day, and different people have different benchmarks. But I'm here to tell you, the audience, everybody, do whatever works for you, but also forgive yourself and understand that it won't be the same thing every time. It won't be. And if you do 5 pages every day, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then Thursday, you can't, it's okay. Go for a walk, clear your mind, go watch a favorite movie, go clean your kitchen, do whatever it is that you can allow yourself to just go do something else. Because when I pressure myself, when I say, I'm going to take a walk and create the perfect ending, I'm gonna do this and it's gonna come to me, it's not gonna come to you. No. For me, I'll be in the middle of something else entirely. I might be in the grocery store and go, oh, Jeanette is Rodrigo's sister, and have the idea. And again, that's amazing. Thank you, Inspiration Fairy. But the more that you sit there and you go, but who's Jeanette? But who's Jeanette? But who's Jeanette? But who's Jeanette? You are literally closing your brain down, and it's not going to work. So just forgive yourself. Go have a snack. Go do something else. Do a phone call with your friend or something. And it is true. They say, and neuroscience has said, if you take a walk, if you take a shower, if you do something that's unconnected to those things, then your brain might start doing it. A lot of people too start doing it when you're falling asleep. You sit up suddenly, or you dream about it or whatever. That's great. So know that those things could happen, but don't expect them to happen. Don't beat yourself up. Don't beat yourself. The idea will come to you. The other thing is having someone else read it does wonders. When you sit there and you're doing it all by yourself, something might not occur to you. And then I have you read it and you go, oh, I thought that was really cool, this part, blah, blah, blah. And suddenly somebody else, has an idea or see something you didn't see. What I love too is when there's something that's in your brain that you think maybe could be an idea, but you haven't written it out or you haven't vocalized it. And the person who read it or the audience member says, wouldn't it be cool if blah, blah, blah? If that happens, lean towards it, because it means your instinct was right. Go ahead and do it. And the other advice I have is, though this is hard for me, write it both ways sometimes. If you aren't sure if you want this to happen or this to happen, write both versions of that scene. What happens if they leave? What happens if they stay? What happens if she takes the job? What happens if she doesn't take the job? And hey, maybe you end up with like a choose your own adventure play where those outcomes actually are part of the story. And maybe it just informs you about your own writing style or about your characters a little bit. It's not wasted time if it's still finding out something about your story. And again, it's fine if you need to pause on it. The other thing too is if I have more than one thing that I'm working on, inevitably, the one that I'm blocked on and I'm working on something else, I'll unblock because I'm working on the other thing. But the other thing's due first. The other thing has a deadline first. The other thing's today. But my brain's going, but what about this one? So, it can be both a blessing and a curse to have multiple balls in the air at any given time, because your brain is trying to figure them out. And you might have a solution.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to ask, do you have sort of a backlog? A few of the playwrights I've spoken with say they just never throw anything away. And an idea that may not have worked 10
Yep.
years ago, they go back and go, oh, wait a minute. And then 10 years later, however long later, they decide to run with it. Have you ever had that
Yeah.
experience?
Absolutely. I have, whenever I have a random idea, I write it down and I save it in a certain way. So I have a tangible, like actually written, handwritten stuff, and I have a digital file where it's just like little ideas. And sometimes it is an idea that's more fully formed, but I just don't have the time, or I'm in the middle of something else right now and I am saving it for later. And sometimes it's a dream or a little fragment of something that I recall and I just write it down and save it for later. And that can be great because then you can go to that folder when you're stuck. You go to that folder when you're, oh, I have this writing opportunity. They want me to present 10 brand new pages. What can I write? And you can just go and look at different things. And sometimes I've combined them. Sometimes there's been this idea and a couple of years later, there's been that. And I'm going through that and I go, oh, wait, that has a commonality. They both take place in a barnyard or whatever the case may be. Let's see what happens if I combine them and go from there. Yeah, and I tend to finish things because there's a deadline, because I'm writing for a certain opportunity, because there's a prompt. I'm involved in some writing groups that, you know, you do have to execute a brand new idea. And then the other thing is, by having so many plays, when I do see an opportunity that says it needs to be X, Y, or Z, it means I can go through the plays that I've already written and see what I have that fits. So it just depends on what the situation is and what the submission opportunity is. But certainly I have a whole bunch of things that are unfinished. I have a whole bunch of things that are just ideas, like just log lines, just what ifs. And what if is my favorite question. I think I was born asking it, alongside how and why. And as a storyteller, that's what prompts me. I've written things because I watched a movie or a TV show and I was disappointed by how it ended, or upset, let's just say it. And then I've written something else. Well, what would have happened if this had happened? What would have happened if that had been set in, you know, the 1800s instead of the 1900s? How would that have changed it? And then you have your own story. You're not ripping anybody off. You're just taking an idea, a kernel of an idea, and going from there. You might end up with something completely different than what you thought you would have in the first place too, which is really fun. It's part of the journey.
What an incredibly empowering exercise. Instead of just being completely annoyed like that,
Yeah.
and just to go, what would I have done? How would I have done it? Let's go play with it. Love your sense of play, and like, let's just go.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Back when I was in high school, and Bud Stringer was my drama teacher, I remember him teaching us about the magic if in theater, like, you know, your what if, like the magic if in theater, you know, it can be just the magic if. And I just remember how liberating that was. Well, what if magically, if this happened? And it's like, well, then your brain just totally opens up. And I think that's so wonderful. And another more practical question. Do you ever use a Rocket Book? Do you know about those?
No, what's a Rocket Book? Tell me.
Something I played around with my journaling and stuff. I'm in and out of it, but a Rocket Book is like it's special pages with erasable pens, so you handwrite everything. But then there's an app, so you could take a picture of what you've written and it'll save it. So if you ever wanted just to write longhand at a coffee shop or whatever, then this app like files it for you and it keeps it. Yeah,
I have seen stuff like that. I wasn't familiar with that exact brand or terminology, so thank you for telling me about that. But yeah, I've seen stuff like that where they're like, just write it, it'll digitize it, which I haven't explored, but it's cool to hear that it's worthwhile. Because writing in longhand it feels different. Literally, it's just a different experience, and your synapses are firing in your brain a different way.
No, Fengar's got all this research on it too. Like you'll retain it longer. You know, there's just. But the Rocket Book is a little smoother, like the pages are a little kind of plastic-like, and so it doesn't grab of paper. Even the feel of it for me, like I had to go back to paper because I was like, oh, the tactile nature of it.
Yes. Oh, yes. And I am a very tactile person. So.
Yes, same. So why did you choose? Well, I think you told us why you chose this theme. It was a prompt, right, for your monologue?
Yeah, but it was really simple. It was literally just that the event was called Woman, and to
Oh,
write something of that nature. And it wasn't like it had to be about specifically a job interview. And I wrote 2 pieces for that, and they were completely different. One was a little bit more autobiographical, and then there was this one which was just, high energy and a mile a minute, which is again one of the things that I do. As you can tell that I ramble, but one of the characters that I play quite often is the really high energy, speaking a mile a minute, everything is great, da, 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 da. Or maybe everything's not great, but in this case it was just all these things that go wrong for this, hopeful job interview, but that she's taking it in stride and going, how can I fix this? How can I fix this in, a little bit of time? And I feel like actors can relate to that too, because you're in a lobby, you're waiting, anybody who's ever had an interview, certainly,
yeah.
but you're waiting, and you look down and you have a stain on your outfit, or you have the wrong paper, or your shirt's misbuttoned and you have to fix it really fast because there's no bathroom. Like, what do you do in that moment? And yeah, so that's how she was born. And the interesting thing is, both of the pieces that I wrote for that event had Wonder Woman references, but neither of them, the event wasn't specifically Wonder Woman, and this was before the movie came out, so it wasn't, for that. But I thought it was an interesting thing, because sometimes I connect things purposely in my work, and sometimes it just happens that way. It's just like when you're trying to think of something and you turn on the TV and there's that thing that you were thinking of, or you hadn't thought about somebody in a long time, and they're on your mind, and you look up and the street sign is their last name. That kind of stuff happens to me all of the time. There's so much stuff in my life that's like synchronicity and echoes. One of my good friends says your life is full of echoes, which I really like, which is good when it's good things. But in this case, I don't recall if I don't think that I purposely said, oh, let's have both of them be about Wonder Woman. I think it might have been just I had the idea. And I did, just like in my monologue, hear about the power pose. So for those of you that haven't heard about this, they say before you go into something like a job interview, like an audition, maybe it's just a soccer game or a football game, right, that you're about to go into, put your hands on your hips, and this is the Wonder Woman pose. Other generations might think about it as the Matilda pose as well. That's something of that nature, but it's about being really confident, and without being cocky, and without being any kind of expectation, but it's about going, you can do this, you've got this, I can do this. And how, again, just changing that physicality before you step into the room gives you a little bit more ownership and a little bit more agency over your own body and over your own mindset to go in there and say, yeah, I got this, I can do this. So yeah, try it before your next interview or audition. Everybody, let me know how that goes for you.
Yes. And tell us about your experiences with play development as a playwright.
I have had the good fortune to work with so many different brilliant people all over the globe. I've had stuff produced internationally in places that I've never been to physically. So thank you, technology, for allowing me to attend things just like this. We're in 2 different places right now, and there's been things. I did a 24-hour play. It was based in the UK. Everybody else was over there, but I got picked as a writer. So I came from my work that day, came home, found out the information, met my actors that I got assigned, really quickly started writing, stayed up that night, finished it, sent it to them, went to sleep for a couple of hours, woke back up. They had a rehearsal. I went back to sleep, and then I woke up again to see the performance. And none of that would have been possible if it weren't for video conferencing in that case, because it was a on-screen based thing. And then it meant the actors were in 2 different households as well, and everybody was doing it as well. So it wasn't just me who needed to be video conferenced in. It was me who needed alarms, though, because they were in the day and I was in the middle of my night. But I've worked with a whole bunch of different places that have different philosophies, or different types of storytelling, or different types of stages. Because if you're writing something for a production, for a certain stage, okay, it's being presented in the round. If you're writing it from scratch for that place, for those actors, for a specific thing, it's going to be a very different experience than your play is already written or your script is already written. And then they say, hey, we're staging it this way, or we have this person, or, this is what we're doing that night. And are you adjusting for those things, or is it a truly a collaborative event where the director is casting based on, what you've actually specified? I think that my most successful and I'm happiest when it is a truly collaborative experience. If I'm not directing, that the director has brought me into it, talks about things, that I am at rehearsals, I'm seeing what works and what doesn't. I am seeing how something could change and coming to that of my own choice, my own volition, because something is or isn't working on the page or on the stage or on the screen if I'm doing something for film or TV, and saying this is what needs to happen because of the story or because of the characters. It still is coming from a creative place. You also, of course, always have the things where they say, we couldn't get another actor, and you go, okay, Deb's now put a fern on stage. What are we going to do about that? There's always going to be those different aspects of different things, or seeing the same play staged in different places.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's about the actual, like I said, the theater, because the staging was different, because it was on a thrust stage, or it's because of the language, because of the culture, because it was being performed in France and there was a different sensibility, or it was being performed by a more avant-garde or interactive theater. I've had pieces that were performed like on the street, that you were walking around, or things that were site specific, and that makes it a different experience. And again, whether your play was written for that experience or you'd already written it and now you're going, cool, I have this cool thing, how do I update it, or how do I make it still work, keeping the not just the kernel of truth but the whole truth of the story. So yeah, I think that more people need to appreciate small theaters, especially. So many are still coming back or didn't get to come back from the height of the pandemic, from just rents being raised in spaces, all these kinds of things that have happened, to say the fact that there's still people that say, I got a story, I got a barn, let's put on a show. Like that sensibility is never going to go away, especially in the theater. There's always going to be people that say, hey, let's put on a show. And that's what's the amazing thing. Now, if you want a huge experience and you want to have, rotating lights and all that kind of good stuff, yeah, you might have to have a bigger stage or a bigger budget or whatever that production value is. But you have to have the story first. You can't, okay, there's this adage that I strongly believe in, and I think it hits all mediums, but you can make a bad film out of a good script, but you can't make a good film out of a bad script. You can't do it. So the story, the script has to come first. Unless, of course, if you're doing something that's improvised, if you're doing something that is collaborative, that is different. And I have a huge appreciation for that. I love improv myself. And there have been some movies that I've really enjoyed that I looked back to find out who wrote it or what the process was. And they say, oh yeah, it was improvised, or we told this actor their story and we only gave them their scenes. And we gave this actor only their scenes. And that, again, is interesting to me because that's part of the process. It's still part of the writing process. It's still part of the creative process. It's still part of bringing the actors into the story, which is very different than going, I have a script in my hand and I'm blatantly going to disregard it. I'm going to do what I want. If you're going to do what you want, then don't use that person's script. Don't do it.
Exactly. Thank you.
Do something of your own. Maybe you read a script and it gave you an idea and you had the what if. You said, oh, what if this was set in Texas in the 1800s? Either reach out to the writer and ask, or pick something that you can do an adaptation of. Pick a Grimm fairy tale. Pick Hans Christian Andersen, but set it in 1800s Texas, whatever you want to do. Give credit to the writer, give credit to the inspiration, give credit to all that kind of stuff, but don't rearrange a script that already exists, because you're going to upset the writer. You're going to upset the people who came to see. Maybe it's a play that they already know. And they said, oh, great, we're going to go see Waiting for Godot. And you show up and there's 7 people and it looks like a chorus line. Maybe that's not what the writer intended. Now, I'll give it a go. There have been really cool adaptations that have done something that I didn't see coming, or done something totally different. But my point is, always involve the writer, always get the writer's okay. The Dramatists Guild contract says you do not change a word of that script or the intention without the writer's permission and input. Yes. And again, that's totally different. I've had stuff just as simple as an actor perhaps couldn't do a turn of phrase. It was just turning into like a riddle, a tongue twister in their
Yeah.
mouth. And great, cool. Let's honor that person. Let's figure something out.
Right.
Or doing something in a different language, and somebody says, hey, this expression doesn't exist in our culture. Here's something that means something. Okay, great. You're getting the same intention across. That's very different than going, I'm just going to go through somebody's script and change whatever I don't like. Don't do that. Please don't do that. Please don't do that. I'm looking at every single director, producer, everybody out there. If you have selected this script, honor this script.
Amen to that, sister. Me, and as a producer, I always have the Dramatist Guild, our version of that contract, and it's just obvious that you don't. This is just professional. But then when somebody wanted to produce my script, right, I was on the other side of it. I'm like, sure, surprise me. And I was like, don't ever say that. Don't ever, because they really will. And
that's how you get a chorus line meets Waiting for Godot.
And like we had to, and it just, they were the kindest people. They were very sweet, but and they had their master's degrees, and it was at a reputable place with these huge resumes, and it was a solo show, and they were like, oh, there's no way this is a solo show. And I'm like, they're like, it can't be done. I'm like, I just toured it. Like it can be. And I did it. And they're like, well, I can't, can we just add a couple of characters? And I was like, okay, but I have 2 other versions of this script with more characters. But instead of asking me for those versions, they brought in like all of these things I intentionally did not want in the piece. And I'm so sorry. And I'm producing somebody else's play in my company while this is like a bonus, right? And so I can't really deal with it or talk about it too much. But then I'm seeing the press come out, and it's like Deborah Randall's unfortunate script, and I was like, what? like I've never had a headline like that. Like I've never. Wow.
Oh, I am so sorry that happened.
And when we went down there, it was like, that wasn't my script. And that review was actually kind. And, and
that's devastating.
They were the kindest people. They were so nice. And it wasn't thrust. And we were sitting in the center, and they were like watching us from house left, watching us watch. And I'm like, oh, and I can only be thankful for their hospitality, but it was so awkward. And I thought, you just can't do this. You can't just change somebody's words. You add huge things in there that I intentionally did not want in there, and take my name off of it. That was the press.
I am so. Oh wow! Everything hurts about what you just said. Everything hurts. Because it's totally different if they said, "Hey, we're gonna devise something."
Yeah,
we're gonna take what you did, like magnetic poetry. We're gonna mix it with somebody else. Okay, then you can say yes or no because you want to be part of somebody else's fruit salad. But otherwise, don't do that. Oh my gosh! Oh my gosh! That's so horrible.
It would have given me that opportunity to say, because they were so inspired by the subject. They just lit up about it, and so they wanted to do it like add, and it was like, you're not making it better, like, and so it's exactly what you're saying. And contrasting, like, I remember during Daria Marinelli's script We Are Samurai, and it's the only time I've ever received a submission, because the way I receive submissions is a lot of what you're talking about, is the echoes and the synchronicity. So I like to read every script, and so I can see sort of in the collective unconscious where my playwrights are vibing, like what they're really talking about. It's like tapping where the world is right now in a way. And then from that,
zeitgeist.
And then come up with a theme for that year. And then I'll do 4 and they'll have one theme. And her script was the only one I got that was submitted in landscape, sideways in 5 columns. And I was like, what is this? And, and she would have simultaneous scenes, and there were 5 different playing areas. And I was like, oh, I love when someone says something that I produced. I'm like, send it to me. I love this. And it was so fascinating to like stage at the front of the storefront and behind the storefront and under the floor of the storefront, and just find these 5 different areas. And then, like, two scenes would be playing and it was up to the audience to decide what was primary or secondary action, you know? And
Oh,
as
wow.
a director, it was totally liberating because I'm like, I'm staging this. It could be a secondary or a primary scene. And then to watch the actors really open up their kinesthetic awareness and their senses so they could hear, so they could keep everything in sync, you know? Because the shifts would happen. They would have to happen precision at the same time for different scene lengths, you know? And so Daria came down to see this and she was watching all of the scenes with no text, which I'd never seen. Like I've had all kinds of playwrights through, you know, and usually they're taking notes and, you know, and I was like, why aren't you watching what you wrote? She's like, I know what I wrote. I want to shoot it. And, you know,
that's cool.
Yeah, at the front, I gave this actor a note of like, could you please mime the samurai wars using only the meows of cats? And she just went, thank you. And I was like, did you thank me for that note? She said yes. And it was so wonderful because she'd be like, meow, you know, and I'm like, and try to get the audience involved if you can. And so we'd have these samurai fights as cats out front with a scene right in the back. And it was incredible. There were, you know, the lights were up. That was it. You know, I just kind of sat behind the desk and just watched the whole play twirl around me. But it's, as you say it was given that structure. So we understood, we agreed to it.
You agreed to it. Thank you. Yes, great.
I think like every production we decide, we agree, this is what we're doing. And this is how we're going to respect the work. And this is how we're going to respect one another. And so we can shift the forms if we want, but we can't lose the respect or the agreement, right?
Underline that, write it in bold, put it on a t-shirt.
Yeah.
Truly, 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 truly. It is very different if they say, hey, we're going to adapt this. Can we adapt this? I'm still going to, as a writer, go, let me adapt it. You want this to be shorter? You want it to be for, maybe you're doing it for a school. You know what I mean? Again, there's some sort of caveat where they say, I'm so sorry, there can be 6 characters, but there have to be 4 actors. You know what I mean? That sort of thing. That's different. Like, let your writer work with that, but don't change it without their knowledge. And again, I'm talking obviously about living playwrights and something that's out of, I've just lost the word for it. Something that is in the general, oh my gosh, what's the word for it, Doug? Like, it's out of copyright. It's in the public domain. There we go. Something that's in the public domain. I understand that that's going to be fair game, but also I've been in stuff. I've been in things that were, this is a modern version of Peter Pan. We knew that as the actors. The audience knew that. You weren't pulling any hijinks on anybody. It says that. It says that on the, you know, like the press or whatever that you say. But yeah, it's different than if you say, oh, this person has a cool, different interpretation of something. They have this kind of idea about it or whatever. Just involve your writers, involve your writers, involve your writers. I was in a play where the writer was, you know, thousands of miles away and came the week, maybe a week or two into opening. I'm not sure if they were there for the opening, and came and said, oh, you know that blah, blah, blah. And all of the actors in the scene went, what? Because that wasn't on the page. Is the thing. It wasn't that we disrespected something. It was that an action was described. We did that action, but there was another piece of the puzzle that the writer had not written on the page because they did or didn't want something to happen. They want the consequence of that action. If you write, I open the door, then I'm going to open the door. But if you want, I try to open the door and it won't budge, you need to write that on the page if that's what your intention is. Otherwise, the actor and the director is going to go, he opens the door. Opens the door.
Exactly,
yeah. So that was interesting because we immediately shifted. We immediately took the note, took the adjustment, and went, oh, you don't want the door to move, whatever the case is. I'm making this up, but it was interesting because it was one of those moments where you go, well, it was on the page. You're not going to argue with the writer ever. Don't argue with the writer. But it's very different than somebody just going, oh, disregard the stage directions or disregard this, or we only have 4 actors in the 6 character thing. So these 2 characters can't be on stage at the same time. Well, that changes the story. If you're going to change it with the writer, change it with the people. And if you want to do something that's your brand new one, do it. If you want to do improv, do it. If you want to adapt something, do it with your troupe, with your group, with your company, with your audience, whatever the cool schematic is that you have going on. Invite everybody, have that agreement, and have that respect. And you might come up with something amazing. I know people that love doing devised theater, that love working with the same people over and over again. I know people that are idea people that say they aren't writers, that they either don't have the interest, or they're maybe a little bit shy, or they're not confident in their own writing. So they have writing partners or writing groups. So they go to Deb and they say, hey, Deb, I want to write a story that's about the Texas version of, I keep going back to this, I'm not sure why. Probably, you know why? Because I have a play opening in Texas this week. Woo!
Congratulations.
So thank you. But you have, you go to somebody and you say, here are all the ingredients. I really, really, really want to make an omelet, but I'm not good at the skillet. But I got you all these pieces, and can you do it? And
Right.
can we do this together? Or there's some people that pass it off. There's some people that say, let me just be an idea person, and you do whatever you want with it. You have an idea. If you work in television, it's going to be completely different. If you have a writer's room, if you have a group of people, depending on how that show runs and if there's a hierarchy, or if it's really, really collaborative, everybody in a room could break a story, and then they go, okay, Deb, you write that episode. Or they could, what I love is when people do this, they go, you're really good. This is an ensemble show. Let's say TV show with 8 main characters. You're really good at writing for Steve and Genevieve. You're really good with those characters. And this is a story that's about Genevieve and Dominic. So Allie, you're really good about Dominic. And then you write the A story and you write the B story. You both have a byline. And those characters are better off for it. And that story is better off for it. It's completely different than if you're writing by yourself. If you're a playwright or a novelist who has decided that this is all mine and I'm writing it by myself, it's going to be very different than doing it with group work. And I think that if you're only one or the other, it could be really beneficial to try the other way. You might learn something about yourself or your writing process. You might find that you really like doing devised work, experimental work. You might find that you love doing interactive work, but maybe one person likes what you just said, is the continuous scenes going on. So there's a full story happening throughout the entire night. Then I've worked also on other productions where each scene is happening in a room. So you as an actor, you do that scene, the audience is in there, the audience moves, new audience comes in, you do the scene again. So you're doing the same scene 20 times in a night.
Right.
Isn't the same thing as what you just described, whereas there's an entire show going on, and you're seeing a different thing every night depending on which room you're in, that kind of thing. So yeah, you dip your toes, try to do something. And if you're not sure if you're a writer and you're not sure if you like that form, watch it, read it, go to a theater, go watch the film version of something, give it a try, read the paper, read a couple scenes, read whatever it is, see if you like it. It's okay if you, as an audience member, you might like something different than what you write. As an actor, you might watch TV a lot, but you personally really like working in theater. There's going to be different aspects, and all of it's going to inform your storytelling. All of it's going to give you ideas, even if you don't know. It's all tiny little file folders in your brain, and you're taking a little bit from everybody you've ever seen, everything you've ever heard, every food you've ever tasted, all of your experiences, whether you know it or not, whether it's subconscious or in the front of your mind, they're all in this back of your brain. And as a writer, as an actor, the day that they say, oh, can you play this role? You go, oh my gosh, that reminds me of that person that I worked with 10 years ago. That reminds me of the girl that I went to school with. And you can draw a little bit from their experience or from a conversation you had, or like I said, even a meal that you had could inspire some really, really cool storytelling. And you never know where that's gonna come from. And it's back to just, are we just telling the human experience? Are we sharing the human experience? Because I know people perhaps don't gravitate towards nonfiction, maybe wouldn't watch a documentary about something, maybe wouldn't want to watch read a news report about something, but you present it to them in fiction, or you present it to them in a more creative way, or you give them a song about it, or you give them a book about it. And especially for people going through hard things, especially for kids, that's a great way to broach different topics, is to give them a story. And then they see it, they see the TV show and they go, oh, they are going through something just like I did, or that's like how my house is structured, or that's how I'm feeling and I couldn't put it into words. And that's the great, great power of the art of storytelling, whether it's in a song, or whether it's a piece of fine art, or whether it's a conversation that you and I are having, that can inspire other people that can help them feel seen and heard. It can give them the courage to do something that they need to do in their life or in their, their artistry or something like that. Or it could just open up their mind, because perhaps I never lived during samurai time. So seeing that play might teach me something, or give me an idea for something, and give you a newfound appreciation for a different culture, a different way of life. It lets you walk in somebody else's shoes for 2 hours or whatever the case may be. And hopefully that opens up people's minds, and truly, truly being open-minded and being appreciative and understanding of different things. It's the empathy machine, right? Stories are the great empathy machine. And when you cry at the end of a movie, some people cry only when it's something that's completely sad and traumatic. I cry at that as well, but yes, and I cry at triumph.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Happy endings make me cry, move me. So different stuff is going to touch different people, and also different stuff is going to hit differently every night, again, with theater. But also it depends on what mood you're in when you sit down to watch that movie. If you're really tired and you fall asleep, that could be one of your favorite filmmakers. Doesn't mean it was a bad film. It means that you were tired. It means that you weren't in the right mindset. And it means that you watch it maybe differently later. Or maybe you try out for something. This is from an actor's point of view, and you don't nail the audition, or you thought you did and you still didn't get in. You just weren't the right piece of the puzzle that time. Right. It doesn't mean that you have to make yourself smaller or bigger. It means that you're pastel and they were going with neons. That's all. And if the palette had been all pastels, you would have, walked in there. Or that they had 5 of the same type and all of you did a really, really good job, and there could only be one person, unless you have a repertoire cast and a rotating cast and that sort of thing. Yeah. It's really, really hard, because there's always going to be other actors that you would involve. But they were really good for this one role, and there's no other role in it for them. So when they're second place to this one role, you can't offer it to them. You can also tell pieces too, when somebody's a really good actor and they shove them in a role that they shouldn't have done. Not that they're not capable, but they aren't the best choice. But you go, oh, that's because they were a good actor. I can tell you just really wanted to work with them. So again, this is to all the actors out there and casting and directors to go, it's okay. When it's your chance, it'll be your chance. It's okay. Just keep doing the work. Just keep writing or keep auditioning. Do everything you can, because you could have gotten chosen. If that person had gotten sick, we all know the break a leg story from 42nd Street. You never know when your opportunity is going to come up. But what that means is that you don't know when your near miss is. You don't know. You don't know that 3 of the casting people chose you and one person was really, really adamant about getting somebody else. You don't know. And for those of you like me who write a lot of short plays, and if you enter a lot of short play festivals, in this day and age, they get 400 submissions and they pick 6. They pick 6, yeah. So if anything, that has kind of given writers kind of the analogy of what actors are going through when 1,000 actors submit to a role. You can only have one actor. So if 100 people get, submit for something and you don't get picked, 5 plays got picked. That means there's a whole bunch of other people that also didn't get picked. It doesn't mean that your play wasn't worthy. It doesn't mean that your script wasn't worthy. It doesn't mean that you aren't talented. It means that they could only pick this many. And that's all that that's all they could program that night. They might keep you in mind for next time. I know that some of the coolest out of the blue, hi, we read your play last year and we'd like to program it this year. Out of the blue emails have come to me. And I think that's so awesome. That's so amazing. Or somebody saw it and they said, hey, I just saw it at this festival. I'd love to produce it at my festival. That's amazing. I love that. I love that. I love that. And I think that's so cool that somebody that's about the piece finding the right person, right? That the script inspired somebody or hit them at the right time. And they said, I really, really want to do this. I've also had people say, I want to do this, but it doesn't fit right now. Can I get back to you in the summer? And sometimes it happens and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes that's triumph and sometimes it's disappointment. Sometimes it's somebody just saying something to be nice. And sometimes it's somebody who really means it, who really, really wants, I really want to work with you, Deb. Keep in mind. And I think it's just stay in contact. I have this thing about being like a realistic optimist. I think I figured out that that's what I am, because I feel things really, really strongly. And I do get really sad and really disappointed when stuff doesn't work out. So having that mix of realism and optimism, and having, like you said earlier, being hopeful and looking for the hope and being grateful for what you have is amazing. And if you can produce something of yours, this is again to the writers, to the actors, to whoever, produce it. It isn't getting produced, produce it. Or grab some friends and just have an informal table read. Do a Zoom or take them out to dinner. Say, let's all go to this place that we like to eat. You know, I'll pay, I'll foot the bill, whatever it is. Just hear it out loud, and you might be surprised at what works and what doesn't work. And maybe again, something will unlock in your brain that makes it better, that makes it a more producible script, or whatever the case may be. At the same time, I've also heard the expression similar to what you were saying about the samurai play, which is just write the thing. Write the thing. Don't think, oh gosh, I want a fire-breathing dragon. Let them figure out how they're going to get a fire-breathing dragon on stage. But if that's the story that you need to tell it. Put it down on paper. See what happens. You can always change it. You can always change it. That's the great, the cool thing. I mean, a lot of really renowned playwrights have done adaptations of their plays, modernized them 10 or 20 years later, or flipped the cast and done like when Neil Simon did the female version of The Odd Couple.
Right.
You know, he had that, and then that was in the 80s, I think. You know, so that was, again, it changed sensibility because of the genders, but also because of the timing. And then also he did the Odd Couple 2 film years later. I'm a Jack Lemmon fan. Hello, my name is Allie Costa, and I will watch anything Jack Lemmon does. So all those different storytelling all came out of the one play, you know, all came out of the original play. But when they did it as a film, it was different. When they did a sequel, it was different. And it was all still written by him, and it was all just different avenues of a similar story. But is it the same story once it's been adapted, you know?
Yeah. I think what's resonating with me right now as somebody who for a decade or more produced 4 plays a year, you know, it was very much that submission process of hundreds and hundreds of plays, and I can only do 4 of them. So I always felt bad because I had to reject like 9, you know, I had to reject so many. And it's always a feeling of elation when I get to offer somebody, but there's only 4, you know, and there's like hundreds of rejections for those 4. So doing
and then the next year you have 400 more, and the next year you have 400 more. So you have 1,200 plays. How can you ever? Yeah.
And somebody might submit something to me that is like a sort of a retro play of World War II, and they don't understand that I just produced something of a very similar theme, and
right.
I want to mix it up. I don't want to keep producing the same tone of something,
Yeah.
you know, and it's just so subjective. And it eventually made me very frustrated that more people hadn't seen my work, because if they had, they would have a clearer understanding of what to submit. So
yes, writers. Yes, look at, I love when websites have an actual about us or a mission statement or something. There is a small theater that I've had the good fortune to be produced by multiple times based in the UK that specifically plays about climate change and animal activism. So I only submit my plays to them that are about that, you know, unless there's a different opportunity with the same people. I've had that, which has been really, really good. They had another event that wasn't those themes, and I said, cool, here are some other pieces, you know. But yeah, you're not always going to get rejected because the piece isn't good or your talent isn't good. It is. It's just that, like you said, and then other theaters have a different sensibility where they don't mix it up. And they are like, I'm having a whole season of World War II plays. All we're taking is World War II plays. And you might kick yourself because you submitted your World War II play last year, and they say only 1 submission a year. Do not resubmit something you've already submitted. And you're like, but I did the thing last year. It's sometimes, again, maybe they will think of it. They will say, hey, it'll work. Can we program this, whatever. But oftentimes you just have to know there's so much work and there's so many people. Don't get frustrated. Don't get frustrated. Keep submitting, keep trying. But the more specific you can be, the more that you can intentionally submit. If there is a topic, if there is a genre, if you look at their catalog of work and you see that they repeatedly do through the seasons known entity stuff, or repeatedly do experimental stuff, maybe that's the time that you submit your thing that's experimental, or that you write it with a caveat that says, hey, I wrote it like this, but you're welcome to do it as a 1-person show. Like, give that a try. Do that, because if you submit off the mark, you're never going to hit the target. It's just hard.
Yeah, and there's this sort of commerce versus artistry. And so to wrap this up, let's talk about the final question is really about have small companies like Venus been of service to you? And I think you've already touched on this. And I had another talk last Friday too, where there was a question of just what is your vision for women in theater and in the arts, I guess. If you had a dream vision for the future, how would it operate that's different than the way it's operating now? And I'm throwing this at you with no preparation, so don't even address it if it's too awkward or uncomfortable. But just those two ideas, small women's theaters in particular, and the vision for women in particular, if any of that resonates, or if you want to speak to any of that now.
Sure. I think one of the things is following through. If that is what as an artistic director or as a producer or as whatever, if you have said, hey, we're going to program this, in this case, all female writers or something like that, stick to that. Because I also have seen stuff where suddenly, again, stuff doesn't meet the caveat. I'll give an example that's not gender-based. Like they say you could only submit comedies. And I'm not talking about subjective versus objective, that something was like a dark comedy or whatever. But I've seen stuff when I was like programmed that I go, that there was nothing, that was not a comedy at all. That was a straight up Civil War drama. Jeez. And you said it had to be a comedy. And sometimes it's more blatant when they say there can only be 4 characters. And then you see something and it had 8 characters and you busted yourself writing something that only had 4 characters. You played by the rules. I don't know why I did air quotes, but because I'm somebody who goes, this is what it said to do. And that's what I did. So along those lines, if you say that something is going to be only playwrights that are A, B, or C, or only topics that are A, B, or C, like follow through on that maybe. And also consider what your definition of that is. Include non-binary artists. Yeah. Talk to different folks and actually program something that it's going to be even more in alignment with what you intend. So expand it. What if a piece gets submitted to you that's in Spanish and you only ever have dealt with English speaking playwrights or English on the page? Like, what then happens? I mean, I had a piece of mine that was produced overseas, and so they said that their main thing was they did everything in English and then had super titles in another language because they wanted to make sure that their audience could understand it no matter what language they spoke, and they knew that they were in a that they would have people who had multiple languages, under their belt, or just the one. And guess what? You've now expanded your audience. So I think my thing when I look to the future or the present of theater mostly is just about accessibility. I just want people to think more about having interpreted nights and sensory friendly nights. I want people to think more about how their theater is situated, and that if you only have stairs or you don't have any ramps, that means that you're not just your audience members, but your actors. People are not going to be able to audition for your play if they feel like they have a limitation, that you're actively not inviting them to participate, even if you're not thinking about it. Because if they can't get on that stage, and the same thing with directors, producers, people behind the scenes, front of house, stage managers, everything. There are people that need mobility devices. There are people that need that have, seeing eye dogs. There's all kinds of different things. And when you don't consider them, when you don't think, oh, well, why would we have an interpreted night? Nobody here is hard of hearing. Nobody here is deaf. Why? You don't know that there is an entire audience that might be attracted to your theater company because you had those nights. You might find an amazing, amazing director who needs an interpreter. Are you going to deny them the opportunity? Are you going to deny you the opportunity to work with them? You could have come up with something so amazing together. So I just want theaters to be truly inclusive as people keep moving forward and talking about doing things that are inclusive and talking about having things that have more of a worldview, or talking about whatever it is. Actually do it. Don't just talk about it. And if it's something that's beyond your purview, your experience, or your expertise, invite people in. Talk to people that are from different cultures. Talk to people that have different physicalities. Talk to people that are from different generations even. Invite those people to the table. Talk to them. Get them on your artistic committee. Get them on your reading committee, so that when these plays are being read, all kinds of different voices are going to be on the page, and all kinds of different readers are saying, oh, this one has merit, this one has merit, this one has merit. You will have the coolest season and the coolest audience, because people are coming because they don't feel left out. They don't feel ostracized. They know that their wheelchair can fit in the theater, and that they're invited on stage. They're invited to audition. They're invited to different things. And stop pigeonholing people. Stop pigeonholing people, you know. Let your theater show a true reflection of what the human experience is and what the world looks like. And again, if you only want to have specifically, I am only a comedy theater, I only do comedies, or I only do short plays, there's still an opportunity to invite more voices to the table. When you invite people who don't look like you and don't sound like you and don't have the same experience as you, you're going to get a richer, broader experience. Trust me. And the more specific a play is, people will think, oh, only this audience is going to come. Only people who can relate to this can come. That's not true. I want people to think about anytime that you've seen an animated film and there's been a talking bunny, and that film moved you, it made you think of your family, it made you think of your own experience. Are you a talking bunny? If you are, let's talk, because I think that's amazing. But most people have related to something, right, in an animated way that maybe doesn't exist in real life. They weren't a human. They weren't a brunette girl sitting in her house in a purple shirt. But I related to that unicorn. You bet I did. So I want people to start thinking about that in a broader sense, and keep inviting people to the table. We aren't taking seats away from the table. We're just making a bigger room with more voices being heard, and really, really celebrating that. I don't know. It's a big thing for me is accessibility, and a big thing for me is actually having equity and inclusion, rather than just talking about it. Like, let's actually do that. And if you have an idea also for a play and it's not your experience, maybe then you are the idea person. Maybe then you find a writer who that is their experience, that is whatever, you know, so that you aren't writing it from an insensitive standpoint. Even if you mean well, maybe there's an opportunity to collaborate with other actors or people that have had that experience, or want to bring that to the page in a different way. Maybe that's something cool where you can pass the baton. You know, maybe that's a way that you can go, instead of directing this play, let me produce it, and let me get a director that is a woman, or has this experience, or has the tenacity or something that is different. So keep inviting people, and keep collaborating with people in a way that is, as you said, respectful, professional, and fun. At the end of the day, if we're talking about theater specifically, like, it's called a play. So let's play. Why are we here? Like, what is it that we want to do? Do we want to bring this story to life, versus drilling it into the ground and taking all the fun out of it? Like, what in it is still light, and what is it still love, and what is it still hope? What do we want the audience to walk away with? And also, what do we want the actors to walk away with? If it's a really, really difficult subject matter, bring people in. Have an actual therapeutic element to it. Have intimacy coordinators. Have those things. If you're willing to program difficult subject matter, or you're willing to program a piece that is about a disability, then you should program it with people who have that experience, have those identities, rather than saying, isn't it cool that this person, no. It's great that you're a chameleon. It's amazing. But at the end of the day, it's going to be more realistic and more authentic if you have people telling the stories and having accurate representation. It's going to be so cool. And at the same time, too, casting, I strongly suggest and strongly encourage you to think outside of the box. Because if somebody walks in and they have a disability, or they have an accessibility need, they have a support need, don't discount that actor. Don't discount that director. Please. They have talent. They have something that they're trying to say. They have something that they're trying to relay. See what they can do, and see what you can do. Work in service of the story together, rather than having it be a disservice by excluding people.
Thank you so much, Allie. It was great to chat with you.
You too.
All right, we'll see your play in the anthology.
Yay, congratulations to everybody that's involved. I am so happy and so grateful to be part of it and so proud of the work that everybody is doing. Thank you, Deb, for making this possible.
Thank you.